Folks, I think we're going to get started. So I want to take a second to introduce Liz Perera, our guest this afternoon. She has come in all the way from DC, so we're very happy to have her. Just a little bit of background on Liz. She studied environmental science at Dickinson College and then got an MPH with a focus on environmental health and climate change at Hunter College, and then got another degree, a master's in environmental management from here at Yale, focusing on climate policy. She's also since held a lot of significant roles in the climate policy space at ICF, at NRDC, at the Union of Concerned Scientists. In particular, she spent quite a bit of time leading climate policy at the Sierra Club. Right now, she's actually a senior advisor with the Department of Energy's Loans Program Office, focusing specifically on community benefit plans and workforce development strategy. So thanks for coming out, Liz.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here. I feel like I'm at home because I went to the School of the Environment, what's called now. It was the School of Forestry and Environmental Studies. We still default to forestry. And it's wonderful because I feel very at home here, and wonderful to be at SOM. And I wanted to first start out with a little bit of like my why, because you may have seen my crazy past and how I ended up in the government. And I will just say, I think I ended up coming to the climate movement in about 1998, and really learning. I was much more just interested in environmental science, and I lived in Ecuador. I know there's someone here from Ecuador who was just asking a question in the last session. And I studied abroad in Ecuador, lived there for a year, and I actually got very passionate about climate change when I saw a lot of the destruction in the Amazon rainforest, and saw Chevron and what it had done in the Amazon, and especially the impact on the indigenous people there, and just seeing the way that Chevron actually convinced the indigenous people in that area of the rainforest to accept spraying of like actual petroleum waste on their roads to keep the vegetation down, and told them this is a vegetation management option for you, and this is going to help you. And so I got involved with the climate movement and climate activism, and saw that actually it was NRDC at the time that was actually in the process of litigating against Chevron for that in international court, and of course went on for many, many, many years. And then I ended up going to NRDC after that. I was at Dickinson College doing environmental studies there, which was still a very new program, and started working with NRDC and the lawyers there, and somehow found myself in climate and energy. And I still, I ended up getting a public health degree in environmental health, focusing a lot more on people and the impacts on our bodies and the impacts from the fossil fuel industry, and then kept doing more of the energy policy space, learning about energy modeling, and seeing those synergies and how the system of energy, how it's impacting us, the environment, our public health. And so that is actually what brought me to the School of the Environment. I really enjoyed studying there. I did classes here at School of Management, and really learned a lot more about the financial side. Took class with Marian Chertow, who I know does a lot of the cross, and of course Brad Gentry, and looked into how we do our investing and the short-term profit gains and the 3-year investment time horizon that we just heard about in the last session, and how that really limits our ability to look long-term, see long-term impacts, think about our own public health. And after that I ended up going back to DC. I ended up almost working for EPA, but I was laughing and I do still encourage everybody to come work in the government. It's worth it. It is. People work really hard. It's exciting. We're surrounded by a lot of really brilliant people, especially right now. But it does take a long time to get in, which is why I ended up applying for an EPA position, and it took a year for them to get back to me and say, we want to hire you. I had already taken another job. I was like, really? It took a full year for you to actually hire me? So we have direct hire authority right now, which is exciting. And if anybody wants more information on that and how to take at some time, be in the government, I think it's very illuminating. And after that, I actually ended up working for NRDC, then worked for Sierra Club, and did a lot of work on Capitol Hill, doing the many failed attempts at climate bills. Waxman Markey, McCain-Lieberman, Waxman Markey. I could list them all. It's like scars in my and so I saw many, many failed attempts with Sierra Club. I think that what really brought everything together with the CHIPS and Science Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, bipartisan infrastructure law, which is in the middle of those two. The thing that really changed the tenor is the ability for the coalitions that have been working on climate change to come together with the coalitions that have been working on environmental justice, economic justice, and bring together, and even healthcare, bring together all of that grassroots power, the labor movement, so that then they could actually get something passed, which of course, as many of us know, the Inflation Reduction Act was passed, if not bipartisan, it was all Democrats that voted for the Inflation Reduction Act. And but as we're seeing now, all of a sudden there's a lot of bipartisan interest in all these projects that we have going forward. So it's very exciting. And I would love to, I am gonna switch to the slides, but then I'm gonna leave a lot of time actually too.
For the jobs that you were speaking of, do you have to be an American citizen? Can you be a permanent resident? Because I'm seeing that there are limitations on some of these things.
I will have to get back to you on that, and I will get an answer for you.
And is your Hunter College, CUNY Hunter College?
CUNY.
Okay.
I love the CUNY. I love CUNY. Yes, thank you. So to get to where I am now, after the Inflation Reduction passed, I was at Sierra Club for that and had the privilege of working alongside leaders in the labor movement, healthcare movement, economic and environmental justice movements to write some of those provisions, which was really exciting. And I still feel like it was kind of the birth of a new era when we got those three things passed. You've heard a lot about it. I think of Chip, Ira, and Bill, which some people refer to as the three uncles. I think they're more like toddlers, and I've heard Heather Boucher do this too, because they're only 2 years old at this point. They're toddlers. They're, Bill's a little older, Chip's a little older, but I would envision them more like the chipmunks. That we have to kind of, we're working with them. We're teaching them to, we need to nurture them and make sure that they're actually delivering what we want. I think that's a better kind of vision to think about because it's going to take so much outside of government to actually make this what we want, which is a more equitable, just, clean energy economy that actually delivers the climate solutions that we're looking for. And so when the Inflation Reduction Act passed, I had decided what more could I do except go into the government and try to help to make sure that what we had promised to the American public with that bill was actually what we were delivering. And one of the big things I was most interested in was the union of, are we delivering those good jobs, the family-sustaining jobs? Are we delivering to communities the solutions that they really want in their communities? And so my current role at the Loan Program Office is I do the community benefit plan work there. So I'm going to go into that in a little bit. And we have friends in the audience, which is exciting. Peter Boyd and I actually work together at the Loan Program Office, and I will give him complete credit for a lot of. The Loan Program Office is one of these government programs that started in 2005, Pete Domenici. It actually is very Republican roots. It was started to finance nuclear, and that was what it did. I mean, it was low-cost financing for nuclear. And it's grown into so much more. Obviously, it gave one of the first loans to Tesla. It really is, Elon Musk would never admit this, but it really is the reason that Tesla was so successful. And it's had a long history. Under the Inflation Reduction Act, its authorization went to $450 billion of loan authorization, which was huge. And we recently reworked our vision and mission to provide a secure and clean energy economy that benefits all Americans. And the mission is to be the premier public finance partner that accelerates high-impact energy and manufacturing investments to advance America's economic future. And really what our mandate is we want to provide a bridge to bankability. If you've ever heard Jigger Shaw speak, he's a good friend. Building the bridge to bankability for emerging clean energy technologies. And it's really about, it is that bridge where really probably what you'd seen at the Department of Energy for many, many years. We have the labs all over the place. We're constantly doing R&D. We're really, a lot of times, sadly, a lot of the technologies that we developed here were actually brought to deployment in China. They were never brought to deployment here. We actually couldn't bridge that gap to bankability. So that's why this exists. We really wanted to enable the expansion of domestic manufacturing and supply chains to support a cleaner and stronger energy economy. All of us saw this so acutely during the pandemic when we couldn't buy a car because of the chips that were needed for those cars. We realized how linked we were and how critical those supply chains were to a resilient economy. And so this is, and we also all saw all the offshoring that happened, and so many communities left with no jobs and all their manufacturing had gone. And then third is to make the clean energy transformation affordable and achievable for workers, consumers, and communities who all stand to benefit from LPO support. That is actually relatively a new part, and actually is more having to do with the Inflation Reduction Act. And then finally, we came around to a set of core values about building trust, which I've seen, there's been a theme today, I've noticed. Everything, we're talking about communities, we're talking about investment, we're talking about collaboration. Building trust has been a theme I've noticed. And kind of that bold collaboration seems to be, a lot of people are talking about. So obviously bold means taking initiative to advance our mission, moving at the speed of business. That's pretty hard in the government. As I just said, it took me a year to get an offer from the government. And understanding and leaning into the risks. This is something that you heard the gentleman from Wells Fargo talk a lot about, how, you know, they getting that commercial debt financing is a hurdle. It's actually quite a hurdle. And so LPO's mission is to be that bridge in between. So we are actually being told to take those risks. So we don't want your AAA investment. We want your B investment. We want your, you know, pretty risky investment. And then we wanted to be collaborative, as I've said, working towards a shared goal, welcoming all the cross-functional perspectives, coordinating with government, and then being dedicated to actually work with clients and we see our clients as twofold. We see our clients as the companies walking in the door that are actually looking for our financing, that can't get in the private market. And then also the client is the American people. That is why we have our authorization. We are here still as government employees to serve the American people. All of us take the oath. Every single federal employee takes an oath to serve the American people. So that's always important for us as well. Also engaging with communities, working with partners, and doing so respectfully, and creating inclusivity, best intentions. And when you're working in a very high-speed environment, which we are right now, the Loan Program Office has about 200 federal employees and almost over 400 with all of our contractors that are coming from all the banks that were with JP Morgan and Wells Fargo. They're coming to do the underwriting, the due diligence, all of that process with us. So and we are speeding up. We are on track to close a loan every week until the end of this year. And we've never been putting out so much in terms of loan financing. So I'm going to switch back. I'm going to switch back to Peter's going to help me do this. I think I can just, there we go. Okay. So I talked a little bit about this already. So where are we right now? This is a snapshot of where we are. We have 211 active applications of $305 billion of loans that have been requested. We get 1.2 new applications a week in all of these sectors. All of these sectors have to reduce carbon emissions. and they have to meet different criteria for our different loan authorities. So I'll go over this in more detail. We also are looking at loans across the country. So we have an incredible amount of geographic diversity. So you can see here, these are the proposed project locations and active applications all across every region of the United States. And these are our different loan authorities. So in our Title 17 Clean Energy Financing Authority, that is the traditional innovative energy. It has to be proven to be an innovative technology. It can be in supply chain. It is also our new state energy financing institution supported work, which is something new that was created in the Inflation Reduction Act, which is essentially allows us to, in a crude way, provide a line of credit to, say, a state financing instrument that is geared towards carbon emission reduction. So state green bank, that kind of thing. For our new authority under the Inflation Reduction Act is the Title 17 Energy Infrastructure Reinvestment Program, which is 1706. That is what you've been hearing about, to basically take old energy infrastructure and replace it with new infrastructure. It doesn't have to meet the innovative requirement of technology, so it can be your good old-fashioned utility scale solar plus storage. It can be anything that is replacing and upgrading old infrastructure. It can be reconductoring transmission lines. It can be replacing those lines completely. A lot of the virtual power plants that we've been talking about with all the demand side management that's going on, a lot of those things are coming in through the Title 1706 programs. We have a lot of utilities just coming to us who are essentially saying, here's my IRP, what can you finance? And they literally are saying, we need $27 billion worth of financing. What can you do for us? That's a really interesting scenario, and I want to dig into that a little bit more. I know Charles is here too, who knows a ton about this program. That is actually mandated to, the savings have to go back to the ratepayer. So the savings that they incur from a reduced interest rate from that program have to be returned to the ratepayer. And that was written into our legislation, into the IRA. So we have a lot of that is in the works, and you should be seeing towards the end of this year multiple utilities that we're working with who are doing big change things like shutting down all their coal plants and replacing them with utility scale solar plus storage or other types, advanced geothermal. They're doing reconductoring of lines. They're upgrading their old hydro. They're doing a lot of improvements to their infrastructure. Then we have our advanced transportation financing, which is the Advanced Technology Vehicle Manufacturing Program, which is all of your manufacturing of EV trucks and EV buses and EVs in general. We're already publicly out there with our, we're working with GM. We did the Ultium loans. We did with Ford, Blue Oval, SK partnership all through the South, which covers Tennessee, Kentucky, and so those are these big manufacturing plants that are actually, can create tens of thousands of jobs and actually be, full operations jobs, not just construction. So they're having huge impact. And we also are financing a lot of the battery manufacturing. So, and a few battery recycling as well. So looking at the EV battery recycling projects as well. So, and then we also have the Tribal Energy Financing Program, which we just did our first loan and we closed on it. We were very happy because we've had that for a while and we were frustrated we couldn't get to loan close. We just got to loan close on a Southern California deal called the Viejas deal, which is a microgrid, and that was financed with the tribe. There's also the Carbon Dioxide Transportation Infrastructure Finance Program, CIFIA, which is all about building CO2 transportation infrastructure and financing that. We've seen less of that, and I think there's a lot of reasons why. It's going to be a longer time frame. So, and this is such a busy slide. I was like, but I really want to show you guys this slide. This just shows how busy we've been since January 1st, 2021. So we've had all of those financing authorities. We've seen a lot of actual investment, and yeah, you can take a picture of this too if you really want. This is all public on our website as well. Please go to our website. Please tell your friends about our website. If there's one thing I've learned about government, they don't have communications budgets. They're like so small, and everybody's just working really hard. And so we've been able to get some of this out there. Jigger Shaw is an amazing communicator, so he's been able to get a lot of this out there. But these are really exciting projects. Just to highlight a few. Hestia is actually is a deal with Sonova, and it's a VPP. It's a virtual power plant deal that actually provides low-income, better financing terms for installation of Resi Solar Plus storage. And then also on the blue side, there's a few other projects. Marahu is actually a project that I'll talk a little bit about later, which is our first Puerto Rico project. We're financing all the utility scale solar. All the utility scale solar plus storage projects in Puerto Rico right now are getting financed through the Loan Program Office. And then Palisades is actually the first nuclear repower that we just did in northern Michigan. That was just completed. And so a lot of very fun things. The Viejas microgrid I have there. And I talked a little bit about the advanced transportation financing. Sarah Vidalia is actually a battery manufacturing, processing of graphite facility. And then on the other side here, we've got Li-Cycle, Redwood. Those are both recycling, so recycling batteries. CellLink and NTEC are components of batteries. So NTEC makes that plastic film that goes in between the cathode and the anode so the thing doesn't explode. And they're in Indiana, and they're a great project. So just a few. We've got a ton more information on our website. Check it out. And the difference between these two, I should go back, are that these are the conditional commitments and financial closings in this time. And some of these were actually from the previous period. So it actually wasn't just IRA bill funded. This is the bill IRA conditional commitments. And you'll see some overlap here, but this just to show we've scaled up massively thanks to bill and IRA, and have been working really hard to get these out the door. So let's talk about what they are doing for these communities. So here's a geographic map of a lot of, and this is it's going to be a lot more dots soon, of our loans that have closed across the country. You can see how geographically diverse this is. And then if you look at the jobs, and this is something I would definitely tell people about because it's not getting out there at all. Our recent Title 17 deals have supported 12,780 jobs across the country. And that's only 17 clean energy projects. And you can see here the construction operations jobs that are highlighted. And these are in places that are really, many of them are really struggling areas. Erie, Pennsylvania, Delta, Utah, Turtle Creek, Pennsylvania, that's where EOS is. If you don't know them, they're long duration energy storage. And as you see here again, Puerto Rico, we have many projects coming in Puerto Rico. Q Cells, which is in Georgia, a lot of projects in Georgia. Georgia is doing an incredible job at attracting investment, and they are going to need a lot of construction workers because they have so many projects coming online. So you see there, just Q Cells, which is a manufacturer of photovoltaics, is 1,200 construction jobs. And then there are other jobs there. There's the Blueable Ford jobs there as well. And then we have the ATVM jobs these are the advanced technology vehicle manufacturing jobs. Again, these are really very geographically diverse, very politically diverse areas. And we've been surprised at how many members of Congress want to come to the ribbon cuttings and are thrilled, even though they voted against the Inflation Reduction Act. And we wish we could remind them, but we're just happy they're there. And it is, so that you can see here, I mean, we're talking about places all across Appalachia, areas of the country that really need investment. And these deals supported 30,300 jobs across the country. So let me go back. So that's just a look at what the Loan Program Office has been up to and some of the impact. And then now we can talk a little bit about, well, why don't I stop there for one or two questions, and then we can go to what is a community benefit plan. Go ahead.
You said that the Congress folks who came to the ribbon cuttings who didn't vote for the IRA, you want to remind them, are you seeing people who didn't vote for it, like, start supporting it and like want to do other measures?
Yes, definitely. And I think it's one of those areas where you really do see, I think this is similar, and Charles, I was thinking about this in your presentation on the PUCs. The more local you get, the less politics can be disruptive. I mean, it's still there, but jobs, I mean, everyone wants jobs. Economic investment, everybody wants economic investment. And so I think this is the place where the Inflation Reduction Act really did break through, because it's a carrots approach and it's actually an investment approach that is showing. And now we've got corporations. I mean, I've actually been on the phone with a lot of these CEOs. They're really across the spectrum in terms of political. We have some very conservative CEOs that have benefited from these investments, and it is changing the way they're seeing things. And so yeah, I would say definitely there's absolutely much more support there. And certainly the ones that are like currently trying to get all their projects done and through our program are even more supportive because they're afraid that, what might happen in a change of government. So any other questions or?
Yeah, that's actually what I wanted to ask was, does the funding amounts, are they going to change depending on the administration?
Yeah, well, the good thing is when we wrote the Inflation Reduction Act, this authority expires in 2026. So we tried to actually write this into the law that on off years. I mean, it's always going to be on a congressional cycle because they're every 2 years. But this is on the off year of a presidential cycle. So we have this authority until 2026, until September 2026. And to be honest, we actually have a lot of Republican support for our authority and the Loan Program Office. So again, where we've been able to have a lot of support, we are more than happy to provide as much information to even the Republicans that didn't vote for this bill and try to get more support writ large. So I think we're actually in a relatively good space. I think the previous Trump administration didn't close on as many loans as we would have liked. And so that's a worry. And then of course, the threats of what could happen to the federal workforce are a big question mark. And I do think some of the CEOs that are involved in this are getting a civics lesson. Like, this is, if no one's here to process your loan, there's going to be a problem. But so it is helping to, this is just good investment across the country. So, yeah.
So my question is, given that this whole host of existing and new technologies that is going to come into the country all over, is there a plan for LPO and other parts of the administration or the government to help communities upskill their workforce, and whether it be entry level, mid level, and so on?
That's a great question, and leads perfectly into my next. That's what we're gonna, and that is a huge issue. You see all these jobs, and there's really not the construction worker or operations jobs. This is the big thing I want to leave you with, and I'll go into it. But you've hit on it, which is that the workforce that it's going to take to build this. So these projects have all been financed, right? But we haven't seen this job creation yet because this is still a year, 2 years out. And we have what's called a silver tsunami happening in most of these workforce areas where they're all retiring, and the huge workforce needs to educate and upskill these workforces and to be able to work in these new companies is huge. I have seen some great things that I'll tell you about in terms of community colleges and technical colleges partnering with the companies to directly train the workforce that's going to go right into these manufacturing plants. So, any other questions though?
Yeah, you mentioned the Q-Cells manufacturing deal. Is there a more of a focus on that supply chain issue or more on the horizon for specifically solar supply?
Yes.
Because BABA and domestic content being requirements for all
Yes.
these funds in the space, seems like there's going to be a lag in availability of
Yes.
those panels.
Yeah, in fact, we're like, Q-Cells, you need to build like 7 of these. Like, what's going on? No, we see this and this is where the timing sequencing of the Inflation Reduction Act and the Build America, Buy America provisions we don't have the US manufacturing base yet to support that. So you're seeing some waivers come in. And so we are desperately trying to encourage more of this. And there are states that are working really hard to attract that investment and get it built as soon as possible. So definitely, that's a huge focus of the administration.
I'm just curious what some of the lessons learned were from the first tribal transaction and how it might help spur more of those, and how the community benefit plans differ for those projects, and how the engagement differs.
That's a great question. I think that's a really good example of collaboration. And I don't think I've fully internalized the way that the federal government works with tribes. And obviously these are tribal sovereign nations. We have a government to government relationship. It's very formal, as it should be. We also have, all of our projects have to go through the National Environmental Policy Act. That is another formal government to government engagement. We have to, every single one of these projects has to actually inform every tribal government and go through cultural surveys and evaluate, whether or not there's concerns with cultural issues in that area. And so for the Viejas deal, it really is an issue where there has been some very bad history of the federal government engaging with tribes and offering financial things and there really was just kind of we don't want your loan. We're really not interested in going into any partnership with the federal government with a loan. And honestly, there's also a lot of grant programs, so the attractiveness of a loan is a lot less. And so I would say it was having the partnerships between the developers and the tribe and people who could serve as a go-between and do kind of that speaking both languages of just the interests. And so I think that we learned a lot. I think you're going to see more tribal loans as much as we can. And we really, we can't get that money out fast enough. And we're working very closely with Office of Indian Energy at the department that's also working across all tribal governments as well with all of our programs. So, but that's a great question. Anything else? And then I'm gonna, go ahead.
One thing that's risen in past sessions is just the length of time it can take to unlock some of these things, slowing down the rate of change that is needed. So it kind of comes back to lessons learned, but what is the typical, how long does it take to get one of these to a really quantity? Yeah.
Yeah. And actually it was illuminating to hear Jeff from Wells Fargo say the same thing. I mean, it takes a year to underwrite these projects. These are huge. The amount of contracts, and then I think the benefit to working with the Loan Program Office is that it's a bank, but it's also consultancy, because we have so much risk analysis that goes on, and we have a huge technical and environmental division that is full of incredible engineers that are looking through all the the different, projections and offtake agreements and looking, they actually are digging into to like, do you have the construction workforce? How long is that going to take? These are people who've worked for like Clark and the bigger EPC contractors that are out there. And that's something that, you're touching on a really important point, which is this is the financing. Now that all of these companies turn to an energy procurement construction company to build these things. And oftentimes that handoff and the understanding between those two entities is everything, because it can really slow down your project. A lot of times a project labor agreement is critical because you need all of the trades to be involved because you have so many different types of skill sets that are being looked for. All of the, you need all the registered apprentices you possibly can, all the journeymen and that are actually coming to the project because there's such a huge need for skilled labor. And so it's taking, and I think that role of the EPC contractor is one of those things that's not recognized, and they're the ones who are doing the Davis-Bacon compliance. They're the ones who are actually the steel in the ground. And so it's a little bit of a game of telephone, and then you have to make sure that the company that's getting the financing, the developer, is actually putting in their EPC contract. This has to be Davis-Bacon compliant. This has to, these are our environmental regulations. These are our, and some of the smaller EPCs don't have as much familiarity with that. And so this is where I think this is the slower process that it does take. And I will say there's been some really interesting models out there. Like Georgia actually has done a lot with environmental impact statements for industrial parks. So they've worked with Army Corps and said, we're going to create this industrial park area. We're going to do all the permitting up in front, and we're going to do it with the state. We're going to get everybody on board, and then we're going to attract all the investment here. So you guys can leapfrog all of that process. And that's really been very attractive to these companies because they're like, are you kidding? We can get through permitting faster. We can get through all of this faster. And so that for those areas, it goes a lot quicker because our NEPA process is just in cooperation with the Army Corps of Engineers, who's already done the permit. They've already looked at all the water resources. They've already done it all. So that helps a lot with that timeline. All right. I know we have a few more questions, but I'm going to flip through and then we'll get to your questions. So what did I do with the clicker? Here we go. So what is a community benefit plan? So under the Inflation Reduction Act and when the Biden administration came into office, they passed a number of executive orders. And one of the executive orders really was about Justice 40, a rule of thumb that 40% of the benefits of these projects need to go to disadvantaged communities. They passed a number of other executive orders on labor. There's a lot of programs that have been rolled out through the Department of Labor for pathways to quality jobs. So the community benefit plan is a way to get all of these investments to turn in something that helps them think about community engagement. And I'll just flip through. Basically, for us, it's required for all of our applicants under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and Inflation Reduction Act. It outlines how an applicant will address the priorities that I'll go through in a second. It's only 3 to 8 pages in the beginning. It's an executive format and it's 4 pillars. We ask though that companies are extremely specific and that it's about internal SMART goals to that company. So and then we do ask for as much actual recording of progress as well. It's 4 areas. The community benefit plan has to address 4 key pillars: community labor engagement, and they actually have to give us a contact person for the community. That was a big breakthrough, so that the community actually has someone to talk to. Quality jobs, which is what we were talking about there, family sustaining jobs, actually working with apprenticeship programs. If you're not familiar with some of the tax incentives in the Inflation Reduction Act, one of them is all about labor. It's a labor bonus tax credit. That so the quality jobs piece, usually we ask right away, are you going for the labor bonus tax credit? Because, by the way, you already have to do Davis-Bacon compliant. And you're gonna need to work with a registered apprenticeship program here. So why not get a 5 times bonus tax credit? And so we do a lot of that conversation. And the IRS has already said that if the company is working under a PLA, it will be much easier for them to show that they're in compliance with the labor bonus tax credit. So there's a whole guidance out there for that too. Then they have to walk through all their goals on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility as well. We did get questions like, wait, didn't the Supreme Court just do something with Harvard? And you know what's interesting? Every time the companies are like, well, but we don't care, we're doing it anyway. I've not had one company tell me they've changed their practices from, really diversifying their workforce. So it makes me very happy. That is something I think most of us are seeing. And then the Justice 40 initiative can be everything from jobs benefits to air quality benefits. So looking at the disadvantaged communities in the area, that's outlined by a Council on Environmental Quality tool. And we need to show that this is actually benefiting the disadvantaged communities. A lot of times, this is also a huge area of education for the company. And sometimes the C-suite CEOs are really interested in this, and they do ask a lot of questions around what are the disadvantaged communities, what can I do, want to attract a workforce, we want to do training, we want to work with this technical college, this community college. So it's great. We also ask, so we have something called conditional commitment, which is an announcement when you first hear publicly about our potential loan. And that is the time when we actually are able to talk about the loan. I should say we can't be public with the loan because of the Trade Secrets Act until we hit conditional commitment. And this is when we also are working with the company to make sure they're getting closer to a actual finalized community benefit plan. CJJ is Community Jobs and Justice Team. That's the team that we invented that name, by the way. We're like 3 people, but now we have a few consultants that work with us too. We actually have specific things about the community benefit plan in their credit paper, in their LARA, their loan agreement. So then once that's put in place, then they do report on a yearly basis on progress on their community benefit plan. I'm excited to say too that once that community benefit plan goes to close, with the loan goes to close, that plan will be public. So we are actually one of the first parts of the government that's making those plans public. So we're really proud of that because there's a lot of controversy around that. We're kind of like, if you can't go public with it, I mean, that's for the community. What have we done wrong? And we try to do site visits as much as we can, but we encourage the more like a community advisory board approach where there's actual on the ground engagement with the company. And then this is the closing and reporting. I just mentioned the annual reporting that we require. And then we're just about to, for the first time, end of this month, put those plans publicly on our website. So it's really exciting. Look out for it. Go to our website, tell people about it. The one thing I'm most worried about is that we don't have the community technical assistance in place for communities to actually engage and receive community benefit plans. And some of the companies are actually interested in doing community benefit agreements, which there would need to be a lawyer representing the community in that case. There's a huge need for like first year law school students or first year to actually do some volunteer work with communities to help them do community benefit agreements. And so we're seeing some interest in that in the philanthropic community too. So that's exciting as well. So this is just a couple pictures from, this is our program with AES. This is the Marahu deal that we helped finance in southern Puerto Rico. AES has actually had a really controversial and not a good reputation in Puerto Rico for a while because they had a coal plant that had a really bad coal ash situation, and they've now handled that situation finally. It was actually School of the Environment. I went there 20 years ago. I went to this coal plant, and I really didn't. I saw the mountain of coal ash that they produced, and I was like, this is really terrible. I can't believe that this is happening. And, AES is actually now completely wants to close that coal plant down. They've managed all of that mountain of coal ash. And they're now building utility scale solar plus storage. They have 2 large developments. They have one already that has agrivoltaics, has the sheep. These sheep had just been through a rainstorm. So they kind of look, they look really wet. But there were a lot of sheep, and this is the AES Lumina 20 megawatt site, and so now they're building 200 megawatt plus 400 megawatts of storage. So it's great, and this was really a fantastic community process. There are community members that have been dedicated to making sure that this happens. And there's a lot of controversy in Puerto Rico because their grid is a problem, and Luma, and they are paying the highest rates of anyone in the nation. So then they have terrible reliability. They go offline all the time. Their electronic equipment is like constantly fried by going on and off power. And so I don't blame the people of Puerto Rico for being really, upset about their energy system. But so I just wanted to end with that because that's kind of an example of what a community benefit plan can look like in practice. So I will turn it back to questions because I know we're like 8 minutes. Anyway, yeah, go ahead.
This is great discussion. Thank you. So even before IRA was announced, there are a few manufacturing vendors, who were domestic. Their technology was, here found in MIT or something. And then they started manufacturing because IRA was announced, and they were trying for DOE loans and stuff. But I think somewhere down the lane they could not, so they again, plan to go overseas. And then their current plan is probably 12 to 13 months out. I come from a supply chain background, so I manage supply chain, domestic supply chain. So I kind of talked to EOS and a couple others. Just asking you, from your perspective, what are the main challenges of these guys? And I also wanted to ask the exact same question on skilled labor, which is also a really critical missing piece, which I got directly from manufacturing vendors.
Oh, yeah.
So that's the reason they moved out. So I just curious to know what are the main challenges they face when they come to you for DOE loans.
Yeah, there are many challenges, and I think that's why it does take a while to get through our process. We're not shy to admit that, and I think we do have a great checklist actually that we now put out that's like what you really need to be ready for when you walk in the door, because we have spent a lot of time with people whose projects don't really pencil either, or they're just not quite able to get through due diligence, and they don't, I would say it needs to, again, we have that scale issue of 100 million or more is really what we're looking at, because we're the deployment people. We have those other offices all across the Office of Infrastructure, which is S3 in Department of Energy, that's all the grants. So there's tons of grants out there too, like the Manufacturing Energy Supply Chain Office has tons of grants for vehicle manufacturing, supply chain, and amongst others. They also have something called an Industrial Investment Center program where they are working with workforce training programs as well throughout the country. So I wanted to mention that. I would say workforce hubs too. Department of Labor has actually really well-established workforce hubs that they have developed. And really, we are suffering from what probably most of us remember. There were vocational technical colleges and technical schools all over the country that lost their funding. And some states kept those programs in place. Like Indiana has this amazing technical college, community college program, Ivy Tech, all over Indiana that literally will go to these companies and say, we're going to develop an entire curriculum just for you. That's what they want. And they go on the shop floor and they're like, okay, you've got this machine learning here, you got this, you're programming these robotics, and they just, that's what these companies really need is. So it really is actually interesting what you're saying, because it's kind of the two. The company might not be completely ready for some reason or other, but also the workforce isn't necessarily there, and that drives them sometimes to go offshore. So it is a missing piece, and the registered apprenticeship program across the country is very helpful in this way as well, because these apprenticeship programs, especially the construction work, is intermittent, just like power is intermittent, right? Like you got a construction job here, and then there'll be a construction job over there, and then so being part of a building trade union and a registered apprenticeship program means that you have healthcare, you got some stability, you can have a family sustaining wage. So we've got to be thinking about those things, because if the finance sector doesn't think about that, they're going to turn to the EPC, and the EPC is going to say, we can't build it. We don't have the people. And right now we are starting to see EPCs turn down projects. And so, and they have all the power, because they're like, there's only so many of them. And so that steel in the ground process in the workforce is I think we're kind of at that stage now where all the financing is going out at once. And now we're going to see how is it actually getting constructed? How many do we have the people to do it? So that's a great question. Any other questions?
It's kind of similar, but maybe a little more specific. So SK Blue Oval, I think it's conditionally committed, but and I also think they're primarily supplying batteries for Ford.
Yes, and manufacturing the EV light now.
Yeah, Ford recently announced a substantial reduction in deployment of EVs.
Yeah.
So how is that going to affect that loan for you all?
Well, and actually that's one of the reasons we're still working on closing confidentially. But that's also just the benefit. I mean, the benefit of working with LPO is we can actually adjust. And I do think that there's a lot of talk right now about the EV market really softening, but actually when you look at the data, it doesn't quite support it. So I would question some of that. But yeah, they have decided to change some of their lines, and so it will probably just take longer to get to close. But it's not that it's not going to happen. It's going to take longer. Yeah, go ahead.
What percent of your staff is politically appointed?
Oh, very few, actually. So Jigger Shaw is definitely politically appointed. And, honestly, we have our chief of staff is politically appointed, but doesn't have to be a politically appointed position. And Jigger Shaw he doesn't have to be confirmed in the Senate. It's one of those different levels of appointments. So we are mostly federal employees. We are 200 federal employees. And a lot of very veteran federal employees that have been there for like 15, 20 years. So it's a good sign yeah. Was there another question up here?
I was just gonna kind of bounce off of your question, like changing market dynamics, especially with like all of the new tax credits.
Yeah.
And still awaiting guidance on 45V, and especially thinking about like ACEs and some of these big hydrogen investments that y'all have made. Just how to balance those.
It is definitely, the market forces are really fascinating, because we are seeing offtake agreements dry up because of waivers or different tax credits, just uncertainty in the tax credit, and as you guys are probably seeing too. I mean, but it shows the power of those tax credits, right? Like the power of that's policy. And so as much as we're kind of, it's causing some, I would say what ends up happening is that those companies stay in our pipeline longer. We don't give up on them though. We keep these relations, some of these companies have been with us for like 10 years, and we're continuing to. That's the part of the stuff it's behind the scenes. And then there's a lot of companies we work with, and then all of a sudden they're like, this bank gave us a huge loan. And we're like, that's actually a huge accomplishment, right? We don't get to put it up on the board, but it actually means we did bridge that bridge to bankability. And so we wish there was a way we could talk about that, but obviously the Trade Secrets Act prevents us from talking about it. But it does show the power of policy, and we are actually able to provide them technical assistance too. IRS is they do not want us, interpreting anything that they do. They're very stringent, and we have to refer every single question to IRS. It's like, that's the only thing. But they do rely on us for a lot of our own expertise. So that's helpful. But yeah, thank you for the question, good question. Yeah, did you have a question? Anyone else? Oh, yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so, of course, I stepped out at the beginning exactly with the Puerto Rico picture. I'm
Oh.
the legal bearer of the Puerto Rico Green Energy Trust.
Oh, wonderful.
And, yeah.
Oh, we should talk after. Yes.
So this has been really helpful given other conversations I've had with people at LPO. But going back 2 questions ago to political appointments and stuff. So you said the agency has had the bulk of the people there are veterans, right? That have been there a while. So what's different? And I say that because has the culture changed enough that this is going to stay in place, or is it really so new and so recent?
Do you mean the community benefit plans? Or do you mean?
This other approach to doing the work?
You mean the community benefit plan approach? Yeah, it's a really good question. Because the community benefit plans, I remember I mentioned these are an executive order. And for that reason, they are not in statute and they're not passed by Congress. So what we do, and this you'll see the federal employees are very good at making sure that things stay in place that also mitigate risk. So this is a huge risk mitigation. When you talk about construction work and operations jobs being there. So we are ready to put this in different terms if we need to as well, but keep the work going. And what we're hearing from our applicants is that they really want credit for this work. They're doing this work, they agree it's the right thing to do, and it makes their projects more resilient. So we are going to do whatever we can to make sure that the community benefit plans continue, and it's already in the loan agreements. Once it's in the loan agreement, it's an agreement, and they have to report on it annually. So, but yeah, we are more in the carrot space with it, and really like making sure that everybody feels like it's the right way forward. So, but it's a very good question because it's not in statute.
Liz, I think we're at time, but if you're willing to stay longer, you can answer more questions.
Yeah. Does anybody have? I saw another. Yeah.
So obviously a community benefits plan is not as in-depth as a CBA. So I'm wondering what's like the minimum level of community and labor engagement that you look for? And then maybe my second question, if I can tack it on, is how do the job projections line up with actual jobs created from loans that you've already closed on?
Those are great questions. These are tough questions. These are really good questions. I would say the community benefit plan is what we see as the start to the conversation that maybe the community benefit agreement will answer. Oftentimes, though, we see community advisory boards play a really important role as well. And we've seen community benefit agreements that are really bad, that are actually just drawn up with the local chamber of commerce and don't represent the community at all. So it's all in I think it's about working with the community and the company to make sure that they are creating a lasting partnership and they see the benefit of working together. I think that's the getting to the goal versus the tactical things. And I think for that reason, we do require them to tell us how many community meetings they've had. They have to have that person that's the point person. And they have to also have partnerships in the community with local community college, technical colleges, apprenticeship programs. So we're looking for those partnerships to be there already. So that's helpful in terms of like the level of community engagement. And then your second question was with the jobs, right? And oh my gosh, what was it again? It was
how do the job projections line up with actual jobs created?
This is a really good question. And you actually, what we've learned is we end up with a big estimate in the beginning. They have a big projection at the beginning. It's usually the projection they've given to the state government to be like, don't you want to give us tax incentives? Don't you? And then it whittles down. And the interesting thing is we get the best information because they then have to go do Davis-Bacon compliance. They have to, actually get closer and closer to what the engineering is looking like on the actual plan for the program. So we do get the final jobs. These jobs that we have here are much closer to the